Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are joined by Kirsten Rudberg. Kirsten is a Master of Divinity grad. She's also a panentheist, an author, a screenwriter, producer, and podcaster. Her podcast is called Bite-Sized Blessings, Bite with a Y, and we'll get into that as well. And as a believer in humanity, she uses her words in diverse ways to encourage us to be better in this world, but she's especially drawn to defending our shared environments. That's a lovely way to describe who you are and what you believe in, Kirsten. Can't wait to dig into that. Thank you so much for being here. We're happy to talk to you.
I'm so excited to be here and to meet you both and have this conversation. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, I have about 100 questions because you have a lot of interesting, spiritual, loving, earth-loving things to talk about. But let's start with specifically you growing up overseas and how it led to you seeing the world as, in your own words, enchanted.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Everybody asks me, was your dad in the military? No. And it's his birthday today. So
Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
Dad!
Kirsten's dad.
and he worked for a company. The reason we were over in these places, Guyana, South America, and living in Pakistan was because the company that he worked for outside of Chicago did massive hydroelectric engineering projects and irrigation systems for developing countries. And so it just
Wow.
so happened that my dad, at various levels of the company, was in charge of South America at one point, hence Guyana, and then Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, hence Pakistan. But because of that, I really had this life where I got to travel everywhere as a kid. I mean, I've been to the Maldives, to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Who goes there?
Wow.
Thailand. It's kind of unbelievable everywhere I've been. And when you're a kid and you kind of don't know any better, I went to the American school, and every kid of every kind went to school with me. So I was playing with kids from Germany, from Canada, from Vietnam, everywhere you could imagine. And we came to school and we wanted to play and have fun. But in addition to that, visiting all these countries, meeting all these people, seeing how other people lived, how other people worshiped, there's so much beauty out in the world. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm talking everything from architecture to landscapes to art to creativity to the human beings, including the human beings. And I was just so lucky. I mean, I can't even believe it that my initial introduction to other humans was with kids from all over the world, because I understood at that point that it didn't matter what color your skin was, what church you went to, how you worshiped, what your life looked like. We all just wanted to come together and have fun. And so I use the analogy all the time that I'm eternally struggling to create the sandbox of my youth.
Oh,
Because I really want, it's so beautiful and sad in equal measure, because I'm always like, oh, I'm always like, can we be friends? Because I want to bring people in. I want them in the sandbox with me. I want to play with them. I want to create with them. I want to build more beauty with them. Inclusive communities. Even if it's, if it's a penguin, I'm like, hey, get in the sandbox with me, penguin. Like, what does it look like to save what's going on in your part of the world? I just want to invite everyone in. And it just, living that life made me understand that there's so much beauty and magic out there if only we're open to it, but especially in other humans. And so it kind of just helped me to understand that I know nothing of what's going on behind the scenes of this reality. I know nothing, but it's up to me to create spaces and places where people feel welcomed and they feel like they belong and they feel like they can connect with their heart. And so, I feel like it's a madman's endeavor, but I'm going to keep on. And because I believe in people inherently. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It
Oh, that's
does,
a
and I like you
beautiful
so
answer.
much. I like you so much. What a great,
Yay!
yeah, like
That's
what a
such a beautiful answer. I love that. And you know, it's you hear so much about people saying that it's so hard to make friends as an adult, but I can't imagine that that's difficult for you because you're genuinely interested in people.
Yeah.
So I imagine you're just making friends all over the place, like everywhere you go.
Well, I love it. I mean, I love meeting new people. You know, not everybody's open to it. I mean, let's be honest. Like, I try to have really good boundaries. And
Mhm.
so if I'm not feeling it, I can tell they're not feeling it. I'm just like, all right, I'll see you around because people are always in different places in their lives. But
sure.
I've certainly, had these experiences in my life that have been inexplicable. After I graduated from college, here's one example. I got hired at a temp agency because no one would hire me. I don't blame them.
Oh,
And
stop.
after like 3 months, the one of the people came and said, "Hey, a VP wants to meet with you and see about a permanent hire here." And I thought, okay. So I walked into the conference room. I'd never met this woman. I looked at her and it was like instant. I thought, oh my gosh, it had never happened to me before. I know you. There was this instant like heart recognition. I know you. And she said she looked at me and was like, oh my God, there you are. And we had never met each other before. And she was about 20, 25 years older than me. And we just became the best of friends. I knew that I'd known her before, probably in another lifetime. It felt like coming home. And so I always listen to that voice because I do meet a lot of people, but then there are sometimes people that I meet where it's like, no, this person's going to be integral to something in your life.
Yeah.
And Linda was my boss who became my best friend. She ended up dying of Parkinson's really young and very
Mm.
early. And I went and actually quit my job and moved across the country to spend some time with her while she was going through this experimental brain surgery for Parkinson's. And she passed away the next year. It was really aggressive form of Parkinson's.
Sorry.
Um, and then she left me some money in her will, which I didn't expect. But because she did that, I was able to walk the Camino, which is another crazy story. I would have never been able to walk the Camino, which was such a seminal event in my life, except that I'd met Linda 20 years before
Yeah.
Mhm.
and we had this relationship. So
Yeah.
I've had these really interesting and potent connections in my life that are just, convince me of the beauty all the time.
Yeah, I have a similar story in caring for my mother with Alzheimer's and
Mm.
what doing that led for me. Similar, very similar story. Since you brought up the Camino, tell us about that.
Oh, that's a really funny story. I'm not religious. I'm a panentheist, which means that I believe that God's in everything. And the Camino is traditionally thought of as a Catholic journey because
Yeah.
for thousands of years Catholics have walked it. There are 12 ways to St. James, and so you can pretty much choose your own adventure if you want to walk through Italy or France or Spain to get to the church at Santiago. I was not religious, and Linda had just died the year before, and I went to a feast day at this monastery, and the woman sitting next to me was a carbon copy of her, from her jewelry to her hair. It was eerie. And so
Wow.
afterwards I ran into her and we were talking, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to walk the Camino in the spring." And I thought, I don't even know what that is, but cool for you. Two thumbs up. And I talked to my partner, and so he bought me a bunch of pamphlets at Christmas. He's like, "Look at this. Look at the pictures. Look at the trails and all this stuff." And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay, whatever. Cool hike. I'm not Catholic and I wouldn't do this. I have a job, by the way, everyone." And
Yeah.
then a few months later, I was talking to my acupuncturist and he said, "Oh yeah, my mom walked that. She walked 500 miles until she broke her ankle." And I thought, am I like the only one who doesn't know about this thing? And then this is really weird. 3 months later, another friend called me and she said, "I just feel compelled to send you this movie. It's a great movie about this walk. It's incredible. I think you'll like it." So she mails me the DVD, right? Because that's what's happening at that time. I watch it.
Back in the
It's
day.
Yeah, back in the day. It's The Way with Martin Sheen, which is about walking the Camino. And so
Wild.
I thought, okay, this is getting eerie. And then finally, a few months later, my dear friend was cleaning out her mother's study in Kansas City. Her mom had been moved to an Alzheimer's unit and they'd never cleared out the study. And my friend from the Oregon coast called me and she said, this is really bizarre. She said, I don't know why, but I'm going to mail you something from my mom's study from the 1960s. And she said, I have no explanation for why I'm doing this, but I'm supposed to send it to you. And I was like, okay, whatever. I get the letter, I open it, and it's a travel guide for the Camino from the 1960s. And at that point, I thought, this is not real. This can't be real. And so I pulled a tarot card, and the tarot card said, you've not been listening to the messages you've been getting. And I was like, are you joking? I looked up at God or whatever, and I said, I'm not religious. I don't do this. I'm in terrible shape. I don't know what you're talking about. This is stupid. I was so resentful and angry. And then as soon as I made the decision, every single thing was opened up for me. Someone stayed at my house, someone took care of my animals, and I could suddenly, and then, I had some money, so I could actually do this because Linda had passed away. And I always tell people, I chose a route that was known for how solitary it was and arduous because I thought if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. Because the Le Puy route is kind of known as the party route. So I started in southern France. And France had the worst weather that year they'd had in 90 years. So everybody quit walking. I think it hailed and snowed on me in May. I was covered in mud from head to toe every day. I mean, I took a ship from Miami to Barcelona, 3 trains to southern France. The only reason I got there was some conductor felt sorry for me because I didn't speak French and he walked me from train to train. And then I started walking and I had this movie version of the Camino. It was ridiculous. I've never felt more loved by complete strangers in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of like a dream. I was walking, I got off the train in southern France, and the tourist woman was like, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm walking the Camino. And she said, alone? And I said, yes. And she's like, do you speak French? And I said, no. And she said, this is a very bad idea. And I said, okay, why? And she said, because you're walking through some of the most solitary countryside we have. In these small villages, nobody speaks English. If something happens, you could die. And I thought to myself, you know what? If I was going to die, spirit or whatever would not have sent me on this extravaganza. So I have faith that I'm going to come out alive. I walked into this, I had to spend the night in the French forest because the weather was so bad. So many hostels were just closing. So I brought a tent and a thermarest and I camped in the forest one night, hobbled into town the next day and stayed at this hotel because I was like, I was covered, everything was damp. The woman the next morning said, what are you doing? I said, I'm walking the Camino. And she said, alone? And I said, yes. And she came and she packed up a whole thing of food for me and just gave it to me so that I would have food on the Camino. I had people leaning out of their windows wishing me bonne journée. I had an elderly woman in another village who had like long gray hair. She was so beautiful. It's just so ridiculous. And she came up to me and she grabbed my face. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm walking the Camino. And she said, alone? That was like everyone's question. Alone? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, bless you. And she just like gave me a blessing and like stroked my cheek. I mean, I have never been loved more by random strangers in my entire life.
Wow.
I don't know if it was the route that I took or what, but people were so loving and kind to me, even though I was American. And believe me, there's a lot of prejudice over there about Americans. I was really lucky because I got to do it in this really expansive, generous way for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, for months, basically. A lot of people don't. They have like vacation a week or 2 weeks, and they just every year they go back to where they stopped the year before and they just walk another 2 weeks as far as they can. And then the next year they'll come back to where they stopped the year
Interesting.
before. Yeah. But it was this completely charmed, completely life-changing event. And I never got to Santiago. I mean, I got to the Spanish coast. They say not to walk in July and August, but I thought it's a coast, it'll be cooler. It was not cooler. I stopped going to the bathroom like 3 days. I mean, I got so profoundly dehydrated. I was climbing up this cliff face with my heavy pack one day. I mean, I had that movie thing, which is so humiliating and embarrassing. I was scrambling up this cliff and I had that howl happen where you're completely broken and everything is raw and open and just it's this crazy guttural scream. I had that. And
Yeah.
Wow.
afterwards, I was like, I mean, a thought came to me and I thought to myself, oh dear, I mean, that's not a healthy thought. And I wonder if that's what this whole walk was about. And then I thought, I hope no one heard me, even though I'm like in the middle of nowhere. But yes, I think there were some people who were hiking ahead of me. When they passed me, they were very polite and they were like, hi, how's it going? Yeah. You okay? But I mean, the second I had that howl, the second that happened, I mean, it was like an epiphany. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did what I was supposed to do. That's
Wow.
what this journey was about. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go lay in bed. And I had to lay in bed for a week to rehydrate and feel better. But yeah, it changed my entire life. That experience changed my entire life. It was
How
amazing.
how has it changed you?
I'll make a long story short. Years and years ago when I lived in Portland, I rented CDs from this local new age shop. This tells you how old I am. Anyway, I took them home and I listened to them and it was like meet your spirit guides. And I'm like, okay, whatever. This is weird, but cool. I'll try it out. And what came to me was a deer in a business suit. And I thought, this is odd. I mean, his suit, the cut is amazing, but I don't know what's happening. And I said, I mean, what's your name? And basically the deer said, I mean, it starts with an A, but you could never pronounce it. And I was like, okay, great. Then I didn't think any more of it, although deers seem to keep appearing in my life. So after the Camino, I took a ferry to Cornwall and I spent 3 weeks decompressing, traveling around Cornwall. And I went to Tintagel, which is known as King Arthur's kind of birthplace where King Arthur happened. And one day I decided to visit this local mystical place called St. Nectan's Glen. And it's an ancient pagan site there that has transitioned into being Christian/Catholic, really Catholic. And now you have to pay a few euro to get in because someone owns it, of course, but it's known as a really potent place of healing. And so, I'm walk like an hour and a half and then it slowly over fields and then it goes into forest and I'm all alone because I go so early and I'm walking through this forest and I go to St. Nectan's Glen and it's this waterfall. You descend down into it and the trees all around are covered with ribbons and there are coins in the walls because people's prayers and blessings have been left there. And it's like this intense feeling, this energetic feeling of just it's thick because the prayers and the blessings it's just so intense. So I left some of my griefs and sorrows there. And, all along I'm wondering, why did I walk the Camino? And I don't really understand the whole thing. And as I'm walking back, and all of this is alone because I go so early, all of a sudden I'm on the path next to the stream. And basically this voice is like, sit down. And I'm like, what? I'm hungry. And it's like, sit down. And I'm like, whatever. Okay. I'm like the most reluctant jerk ever as far as receiving spiritual blessings or experience. I mean, I've said this many times. I'm sure all the spirits out there are like this one over here is a little salty. So I keep banging her head against the wall. So I sit down and I'm looking across at the other side of the stream, which is just thick forest. And I'm sitting there for less than 30 seconds. And all of a sudden, this baby deer emerges out of the underbrush. Too little to be on its own. I mean, there were no other deer anywhere. Comes out and just looks at me. And we held each other's eyes for about, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute. And then it just melted into the woods. And I thought, what is going on? I mean, the rational part of me is like, where are the rest of the deer? You never see baby deer on their own like that. And then I thought, oh my gosh, that was God telling me, good job. And by the way, you're not the big deer, but you're this little baby deer. And you stepped up to the plate, you met the challenge, you did what you were supposed to do. So this is your blessing to see a little bit more of the mystery, see a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtain of the beauty that's in this world. And so, yeah, I mean, I just took that and I ran with it. I got a tattoo on my back, a deer. in the
As one
forest of
does.
Magnolia, as one does.
Yep,
Yes.
as one does.
Yep.
Excellent.
And it just really changed my life.
When you did that scream, that guttural, here I am, did that feel like a ego death of sorts to you? Is that like a major shift of change of death and rebirth, or
Wow. Well, the screenwriter in me was like, good Lord, you're predictable. Every movie has this scene in it. Can you not do something different? You're so pedantic. But then after I got over that, it really created this, I'm going to call it this inception point, kind of,
yeah,
because I think we all have these inception points in our lives where we have an epiphany, and epiphany kind of means light shining forth. So people have epiphanies all the time. It's illumination. It's kind of
Mm.
like witness or notice, understand that this is a moment in your life. So an inception point, where I think of inception points as roundabouts. People always, sometimes they hate roundabouts. They're like, you keep going in circles and nothing ever changes. But when you hit an inception point, you can take it in, you can witness it. Do you actually absorb it? Some people don't. And they
right,
kind of go around the roundabout and they head back where they started.
right,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
You can go off to the right, maybe because you're not ready. You can go around and go straight ahead. And I think that's like a full assimilation of what's been shown you. And that's what I did. Or you can, keep going and sort of be like, oh, so that opportunity is there, but I'm gonna maybe wait, delay it a
yeah,
little
Mhm.
bit.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I love
So
that.
what it revealed to me was that I had, that I had, how do I say this? That my voice, me, who I was, I had erased for everyone else in my life. And that I had given power to other people in my life. And so when I had that guttural scream, the first thing it came to me was, because it revealed a lot of other stuff as far as my voice, but the first thing, I had a boyfriend at the time, the first thing it revealed to me was, he will never allow me to stop walking this Camino. And I mean,
Mm.
it was such a strange revelation. I thought, whoa, where did that come from?
Mm,
Mm.
And I mean, because it was so unconscious how much power I'd given away.
Mhm.
And this was my walk, my
Mhm.
journey, my opportunity. But was I actually walking it, or was I doing it for someone else?
I hear you.
Yeah. And so I mean, it made, and so I thought, oh my gosh, you can't walk away from a revelation like this. I have to
Mhm.
understand where this came from. I have to understand why I was operating in this way and for how long,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and it needs to change.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. So once you got back to your, back to your regular life, is that when you decided to go to seminary?
Well, so I walked the Camino in 2013, and
Mm.
probably because I grew up all over the world, I've been fascinated and intrigued by just folk tales, myth, stories from all over the world my
Mhm.
whole life. Like, I can't get enough of them. And I love how humans create meaning, which is why I do my podcast. My podcast is essentially about people creating meaning from moments in their lives. And I think because I'd grown up and seen how people worship all over the world, and this ex-partner of mine had a whole bookshelf of so many strange books that, the Rule of Benedict, which is a Benedictine order of monks. He had all these mystical works by Teresa of Avila, Hildegard of Bingen, and I just was drawn to them so desperately. It just felt more and more true in my heart that going to seminary was my path. And I often tell people that if you are jealous or envious of what someone else is doing, if you feel this like clutch in your gut and you're like, oh, I wish I was doing that. Oh, I'm so jealous. Grr. That probably means that you're supposed to be doing that. And so I was listening to NPR one day, and there was a rabbi, a priest, and an evangelical pastor. And I was so annoyed that I wasn't being interviewed in that. And I thought, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I think I need to, I'm being called to this. I really feel compelled. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of out of jealousy. Can you believe that?
Totally, totally can believe
Well,
it.
if that's what it takes,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
There's the sign and the signal that you listen to.
Actually, I think that's so real. Raquel, think about all the podcasts we've had where people are saying, if you're feeling an emotion is what it is. It's a signal telling you something. What is this jealousy telling us? I want that too.
Mm-hmm.
I want that. It doesn't mean we want to take it from someone. It means I want it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
So-
listen to the signal. That's awesome.
So great.
Yeah, because I didn't want to feel icky anymore. I was like, I can stop feeling icky if I go to school and spend $70,000 doing it. So basically, yeah, I mean, higher education is not cheap anymore.
Sure that.
But I just thought, you know what? Since I'm being called to do this, I know I'm gonna get. And by the way, everyone thought, my whole family's like, you're insane. You're not religious. What are you doing? How are you gonna pay for it? Even though I'm the eldest, I'm sort of the black sheep because I've had an unconventional life. They're all worried about me. But when I graduated, I sold my house and I paid off the debt. Yeah.
Wow.
And the degree you received is a Master's of Divinity.
Yeah.
What do people do with a Master's of Divinity?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, if you are in a faith tradition, so let's just say Presbyterian, what you would do is through the process of seminary, you'd be in conversation with the elders in your denomination. They would witness your process. You'd start discernment. And then most likely you would be on track to become clergy with that denomination. However, I have gone, a lot of the people in my cohort, they become chaplains. So one of my dear friends in Utah is a chaplain, and she chaplains at 3 different places, including an institute for kids who self-harm.
Oh,
So people are doing lots of different work, chaplaincy, clergy. A dear friend in Oklahoma works at a nonprofit to help those without housing. So a lot of social justice stuff, because the seminary that I went to was quite liberal.
Right.
And they really want to encourage you to go out and make this world better for others, to work for others, live for others, any sort of thing. Me, right now I'm doing a podcast and writing, doing fun stuff.
Tell us
Nice.
about your podcast.
Yeah, bite-sized blessings. I graduated in the middle of the pandemic. So as you can imagine, there were no jobs anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was, after graduating, sitting on the couch, as you do. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do with my life? And so many people at that time on social media were so depressed and struggling, isolation, loneliness, questioning everything. And I thought, it's strange. So many people come up to me and they tell me these stories of weird things that happened to them. I love those stories. I love them. And I wonder if other people would love hearing about them. So I just started with my cohort and I said, hey, would you be a guest and maybe tell a story of something that happened to you that's inexplicable or magical or something that changed your life? And a lot of them said yes. So I started just recording. And I was so terrible at first. I had no idea what I was doing. It took me 26 hours to produce the first episode. I mean, I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But,
We've been there.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a selfish endeavor. I love hearing people's stories. I've had stories of ghosts, of fairies, of having a vision when someone was lost in the woods. I've had stories of really seminal moments when people's parents are dying. My friend who's a chaplain told this completely bonkers story about what happened with a small child when the child's mother was dying in the next room. It's just, and it's allowed me to understand that there's way more going on in this reality than we can even suspect or imagine.
Yeah.
But the fact that so many people are willing to talk about it, I think this is a watershed moment of hopefully people being more open to possibility, like
Mm.
believing the world is more generous and beautiful despite all the horrific things happening in the world, that there is hope out there in
Hmm.
general. So yeah. So every episode I have the interview with the person, or I have a little bite-sized nugget, which is just the magical or miraculous event. And it's I love meeting people and I love hearing their stories.
Wow. I mean, I love that you continue to talk about how connected things are and making the world a better place and seeing the good that's in the world and that it's everywhere. It's not just one isolated thing.
Yeah.
Um, and from what I've heard you say about panentheism, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Um,
Panentheism.
pa
Yeah.
yeah, and, on your website and in some of the interviews that you've had, I would love to hear more about your thoughts around panentheism and how that connects with the way that you feel about the world being connected and there being more good in the world and adding to the good that's in the world.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to know that I told you I love myth and story and fable. So part of me operates from this idea of the eternal battle between light and darkness. So it's like the
Mm,
storyteller in me is like, what does that look like? But you also have to know that from a super young age, I don't know why, I love science. My dad subscribed to a science magazine for me when I was a kid, and so I would read it and I couldn't get enough. So part of
science is awesome.
yes, it is. It is awesome. So part of me, I'm coming from this place of like quantum mechanics
Mhm.
and the Big Bang and spooky action at a distance, which was recently proven to actually exist. So, if you want to do right brain, left brain, or, rational versus irrational or fantastical, rationally, quantum mechanics and spooky action at a distance posits that everything's connected. And
Mhm.
that if you do believe in the Big Bang and everything coming from this point, that means everything from that point is connected all the time, eternally,
Yeah.
always, always. And you can't get around that because studies and physics are playing that out and
Mhm.
they're proving it out. So that's one piece of it. However, I do take that in with me as far as how I act in the world and interact with other people. Look, I'm not a saint. There are lots of times I'm like just a terribly, terrible human being and I whine. There's a
Mhm.
lot of whining. There's times I don't feel gratitude. I'm just super grumpy and like kicking the can and
Oh, what? You're a human?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, I was just thinking that too. Yeah, so you're
Yeah.
human.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
look at that.
yes.
Us too.
But yeah, you too. How strange. How
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
And so there are so many myths and stories, and by the way, one of my favorite books is The World We Used to Live In by Vine Deloria Jr. It
I don't know
is
that
one
one.
of the
I don't
most
either.
powerful books I've ever read. He is he's passed away now, indigenous and an amazing writer. He wrote God is Red as well. And he basically, the world we used to live in is about what indigenous shamans, how they used to heal, how they would call in the spirits. And I'm telling you, some of the stories in this book are, there's no rational explanation for what happened. And by the way, many of these things that he talks about were witnessed by 30, 40, 50 people, and they all have the same story to tell. And I actually
Wow.
just interviewed a gentleman who the other day who was lamenting this knowledge that's disappearing.
Yep.
Mm. Mhm.
And that he's like, I don't know how we're going to get it back.
Yeah.
But that aside, you've got science over here that posits that everything's connected. So I can't ignore that. But then I've had so many experiences in my life that have been completely bizarre and have been just insane enough that I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's connected
Yep.
because I can't get away from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how much more beautiful is it to consider that versus other stories that we hear, you know, that we're all so different, that we are too diverse, or that we shouldn't be diverse, or that everyone should be the same, or everyone should be blonde, or everyone should be. No, I mean, I think there's power and strength in diversity. I mean, I always
Mm-hmm.
think, like, how boring would the world be if we're all the same? It'd be so boring.
Absolutely.
I would be so annoyed with everything and everyone. But just realizing that we can be connected and be in community and collaboration, and everyone brings their ideas, I think that's exciting because I certainly can't figure out everything on my own. I need to hear from other people. I need to
Mm-hmm.
get other people's ideas.
Oh
Did I
yeah.
even answer your question? I hope I did.
No, you did. You did.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I just, that comes up a lot on our show about how that we're all connected,
Mm,
right? And that something that you do has an effect on other people, right?
yeah.
And so we aren't in this alone.
Yes.
I mean, I know it feels like it quite often, and so many people go through life feeling alone and lonely and disconnected.
Yeah.
But I have to believe that if more people tuned into how connected we all truly are, and not just people, but and you've talked about this, Kirsten, in in your work, that we're also connected to nature, like your story with the deer. We're all connected. What happens in one part of the world, even if it's just indirectly, affects something somewhere else.
Everywhere else.
Yeah. And so to have that safety, or that sort of hold that we're all in this together, I have to feel give some hope,
Yeah.
right? That A, you're not in it by yourself, and B, there's hope that we can bring it all back together for the betterment of the planet.
Yeah. I mean, I really do feel, I mean, one of the most powerful things you can do is invite someone in
Hmm.
and have them belong or feel a sense of belonging in our society, in our world. I think a lot of people are really, I don't know, they master the art of excluding people.
Right.
And I that just seems like so much work.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of being lazy. And so I'm like, come in and play with us and have fun and belong. Not okay, and I'm speaking in broad generalizations here. Not everybody wants to belong to things, but
Right.
those who feel like they're on the outer edges, bringing them in and letting them know that they matter, that their voice matters, that they're beautiful, that they can belong. There's such an insane level of loneliness and depression right now. It
There
Hmm.
is
is.
just astonishing. And
Hmm.
I'm not clear where everything's breaking down, except that we're all so isolated and we're bombarded 24/7 with bad news.
Yeah.
There's every time you turn around, there's another shooting. Human life seems to be eminently disposable.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a world like that, where, certain people get to live, certain people have privileges, not everybody has a voice, the people who are really feeling it, who are sensitive, are thinking to themselves, do I even matter?
Mm.
Is anything I do? And, so many people that are in these jobs that don't inspire them.
Yeah.
This world is a place where human beings are not sacred anymore in a lot of spaces. So, it's important that you make money for the company, but you get 2 weeks off to feed your soul, and that's it. I mean, human beings are so disposable now, which is so interesting based on what's happening in the United States. It's actually really fascinating. I mean, that's a bigger discussion, but we really need to start letting people or allowing people to see that. And how do you do it? With every person, it's different. You have to meet each person individually and show them how they are magical. And so we really need like an army of people going out there and reminding people that they matter, that they have something beautiful to contribute. You know, it doesn't have to be something grand like you heal people with your hand. It can be enough that you volunteer at a food bank. You can maybe buy a muffin and a coffee for someone who doesn't have food once a week. I mean, we can all do beautiful acts all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really hard to remember that there's hope
Yeah.
in this world because this world is so hard. It's so hard. Lots of people are just trying to survive day to day, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like your podcast is a way of showing that magic. You know, like sort of stories that people tell of things that happen to them, that those are magical things that happen. Those are wondrous things that happen.
Yeah.
And to remember that wondrous things can happen to just regular people is key. And we aren't reminded of that necessarily on a daily basis. To have people bring those reminders and put them out there for people, I think that's key. We all need that. We all need those reminders.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, every life is a journey. And, you know, I was put on Prozac when I was in a senior in high school and have had profound depression and
Mhm.
profound emotional upset and just things that would break your heart. Now, some of it is absolutely ancestral, just trauma and I know that because of some of the work I've done
Mhm.
with my body with somatic work, but a lot of it is also being in a world that seems so hopeless.
Yeah.
And so I don't come to you today having been joyful and wanting to play in the sandbox my whole life. I had to go through the muck and the mire. Or did you ever see Neverending Story, The Swamp of Sadness? I had to
Mhm.
Yep.
go by myself
Mhm.
without a horse through the swamp of sadness. And, you know, there were many times I could have been sucked down into that mud. But you know what? I don't know why, but I was shown things or led to walk the Camino, and I showed up for those things. I chose to believe that there were connections. I chose to believe that there was magic. I chose to believe in the madness that I thought was being shown me. And because I showed up and I followed the path, my heart has been healing. And so I can be more present for other people and help other people. So yeah, total world domination happening right here.
Yes.
There
I'm
you
here
go.
for it. Totally here for it. It's awesome. I have one more question for you. You are so creative. You have the podcast, you've written books, which I want to get my hands on now that we've chatted. You have an animation series.
I
You're
binged it, by the way.
you did? Oh,
Oh my
cool.
gosh,
The whole thing. It was awesome.
You've done playwright work. How do you get so much creative expression? Where does it come from?
So I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you're familiar with Maya Deren, who is a cultural anthropologist who went to, this is how I describe it.
No.
So she went to Haiti in the 1940s and 50s and studied voodoo and
Mm.
studied that worship, that way of worship. And so I bought her book, The Divine Horseman, and basically she spent years, was a documentary filmmaker as well, chronicling this style of worship. And then she wrote this book, The Divine Horseman, which is unbelievable and amazing. Basically, she talks about, you know, they have these ceremonies and they petition a god to come down, and the god comes down and mounts someone, which is why the book's called The Divine Horseman.
Mm.
Mhm.
mounts the person like a horse, and then starts, I mean, it is astonishing what happens in these ceremonies. You know, the person completely changes, gives advice, gives blessings, gives healings, does all this stuff. And my creative process is like that. I I mean, I spend 50% of the time denying and ignoring it, but I will feel something on my back that's riding me. And I had a point in time during the pandemic for about 3 months, which was exhausting, where I felt like I was being ridden every day. And I would basically get up, and if I ignored it, I would get more and more grumpy and feel like I was getting sick. But then I would just sit down and maybe write 3 episodes of I have a web series I wrote called Poncho in the Car with Noodles.
So even more
So
creative energy.
yeah, each episode is 10 to 11 minutes long. I like the short form, but I'm I don't know. It just comes out fully formed. And
Yeah.
I can just write a script, but that's because it's been sitting on me. And so I
Mhm.
tell people it's not really me that's writing these things. It's like something else writing through me. I'm just like the vehicle. And that sounds so cheesy and
Mm-mm.
ridiculous,
Not to me.
but
Mm-mm. Not at
I
all.
get to just write really strange, weird, funny stuff. And I love every second because it feels like playing for me. Writing feels like play. And I'm lucky. And I'm also lucky that, I sent Pancho in the Car with Noodles to one of my dear friends who helped write Ben is Back with the gentleman who wrote What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And
Mm.
she read it and she was like, wow, this is practically perfect. Nothing really has to change. And I was like, I didn't write it, but thanks. At least someone with taste is coming through. And so I'm lucky. I'm lucky. Now it's up to me to do the hustle and pay, right? Because it costs money to produce that animated series. And so every once in a while, I'm like hustling, making some money, and then getting something else out in the world. I wish I could say it's all me, but it's not. I'm just like the horse. I'm the horse that can actually hold a pencil and write or type. Nobody uses a pencil anymore. I'm the horse that can use a keyboard.
There you go.
I just
There you go.
dated myself tragically.
My dad
Tragically
used to
dated.
write his books on yellow legal
Yes.
pads with a
Mhm.
pen. That's how he wrote everything. No one does that anymore that I know
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that I
Mm-mm.
know of. No.
Yeah. No.
Your Peter Rabbit remake book, is it a children's book?
Well, it is dark. So
Is
I would
it?
say
Okay.
10 and over is the first one is A Tale of Two Rabbits, and it's a rewrite of Peter Rabbit, and it's going to be a 13-book series that kind of becomes science fiction-y at the end and deal with the multiverse. But I'm
Ooh.
using Peter Rabbit as kind of a springboard. So the first one is a rewrite of Peter Rabbit. There's a skinned rabbit on the cover because I want people to just know that this deals with events that are a little
Yeah.
darker. The
Yeah.
second one is a rewrite of Squirrel Nutkin. So it's called The Nuts Guts. And it's more playful and fun. I'm world building right now. And so then the third book that comes out is a rewrite of The Tailor of Gloucester. And it's about a cat that runs a sweatshop for the tailor in the town, for the people who it's all about consumerism and how expendable little mouse bodies can be. And it's called Boom Chicka Meow Meow. And it's launching at the end of April. And so I'm really world building, but
Mhm.
each book is engaging with this story of how we affect the environment, how we use other people, how humans are disposable. And a lot of it is around resources, consumerism, how that mouth is never satisfied or satiated,
Mhm.
and how it's causing us to destroy so very much
Yeah.
and throw away so very much. So, yeah, it's
Brilliant.
fun. I have like the first 7 or 8 written, the first 6 illustrated, but I'm sure as you can imagine, it's very expensive, self-publishing. I love it, but I do have to strategize and wait until
Yeah.
I can do it. So yeah.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant. I can't wait to get my hands on that book.
Yeah.
I was a big Peter the Rabbit fan, or how is that? What is that book called? I forget now.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Peter
Peter
Rabbit.
Rabbit.
My
Yeah.
Peter Rabbit.
grandfather read those books to us when I was a kid. So big fan.
Oh.
Definitely be looking into them. What have we not asked you that you would like to tell our audience?
Oh gosh, that's such a question. Well, I'm a Pisces. for anyone who cares.
I love Pisces.
My
Both of
mommy's a
my-
Pisces.
Both of my
Really?
girls are Pisces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my mom's birthday is on Tuesday.
Mm. Happy birthday to your mom.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that in the midst of so much that's really wonderful about my life and amazing, last October I had to leave my job and quit my entire life to move back to Chicago to take care of my mom.
Mm,
And it's been a really beautiful time. She's had health issue after health issue. And I didn't know caregiving was so exhausting. I had no concept of what I was getting in for. And I have a brother and sister who are close, but I'm the only one who's not married with kids. So, I'm a little more dispensable, I guess, or whatever. My life's a little more open. I
Mhm.
love my mother so very much. It does feel like girl interrupted, like my life's been interrupted. But at the same
Mhm.
time, I think it's important to just know that the magic and these miracles, the beauty in the world is happening all around me all the time, despite what I'm in or how
Mhm.
exhausted I am. And it's up to each of us to be able to like step out of our circumstances and notice
Yeah.
and witness. And so, I went to my dad's today for his birthday. And as I was driving home, I was just almost brain dead. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm so tired.
Been
But
there.
I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, my mom bought me a onesie, by the way. She's very excited about it. I told her, after that interview, I'm going to put on my onesie, Mom, and we're going to just sit in the TV room and look at each other. So that's what my night's going to look like.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Believe me, we have fought too. It hasn't been all perfect, but it's
Mhm.
also allowed me to heal some childhood stuff that's been really necessary.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
I've been there. I can
Yeah.
tell you about that. Yes. What a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's not for the faint of heart.
No, no. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Probably more than you wanted to learn.
Oh dear, yes.
well,
Yeah.
bless you with your blessings because it's a
Thank
lot.
you.
Really. It was
Thank
so
you.
nice to talk to you.
It
I
really
have
was.
loved every minute. You both are so fun. I will send
Thank
you
you.
an invitation to my sandbox post haste.
Yes.
Excellent. Love to play in
Yes.
that sandbox.
Absolutely.
Yay.
You're just so great. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, your energy is great and you are so creative and just
Thank you.
you're just so much light and creativity
Oh,
just
thank you.
emits from you. So
you.
thank you for sharing all of that with the world.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but I love where it's taken me. Crying is necessary, everybody, just to let
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yep. I definitely do my fair share of that.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Shall we recap?
Yeah. What a beautiful message that Kirsten said at the end of there's beauty and magic even in the midst of things that maybe aren't so great, right? Like, yes, she's had to uproot and move across country and, having to deal with her mother's health issues and all of that. But she can still find magic and beauty on all that. I have to feel that being able to see that beauty and that magic is her listening to the signs. Yeah, she said, yeah, sometimes it takes me a minute to see the sign or to pay attention to it, or I just ignore it and then I have to get it all over again. And but it still comes through. And that's such a beautiful thing to be able to hear and recognize those signs and then communicate those to other people in some way, whether it's through your art or interviewing other people or realizing the stories that other people have and allowing them to get those stories out there.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts of the interview today was the tie-in with science and the mystical, and
Yes.
how when we are talking real science, quantum physics, the things that we've been discussing, that they are proving this connection
Mm-hmm.
that the mystical has always tried to say is there.
Mm-hmm.
And those two worlds are kind of coming, I mean, there's proof all around us, and
Yeah.
and it's becoming more and more clear. And I also think that those moments in my life, I can't speak to other people, but those moments in my life where there was the biggest possible trial, tribulation, something I was probably avoiding with all my might,
Mm-hmm.
did turn into some of the best, most beautiful, significant moments.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back for the meaning, I can see how all things are interconnected. So
Yeah.
had my mom not had Alzheimer's and come to live with us, I wouldn't have been working from home. I would have still been out. But working
Mhm.
from home changed my relationship with my daughters, which are
Yeah.
perhaps the most significant thing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I feel truly blessed. People say things like, "Oh, you poor thing, you had to take care of your mom." No, what a fucking gift. No, yes, it was hard, but what a fucking gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea. I only listened to about 3 or 4 of her podcast bite-size blessings for this episode, but I look forward to going back and listening to a lot more of the stories, especially the ones when she interviewed the people she went to school with,
Yeah.
because I feel those are probably the early episodes. I'm going to go way back to the beginning and listen
Yeah.
because I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel this calling that some of that can be explained to us through those episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Her work
Yeah.
is so cool.
It
So
really
cool.
is. It really is. And her YouTube series, Murder for Two,
Mhm.
so good. I highly recommend that people go back and look at it. I mean, and each episode is 2-3 minutes, something around there.
cool.
So it's really easy to, just kind of go, oh, here's the next one. Here's the next one. And it's really good. It's basically a murder of crows. So it's 2 crows, and they're basically observing humans.
Oh, cute.
It's such a really cool way to, sort of dispense that information of humans are a little crazy.
They're a little cray cray.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but it's really well done. And yeah, I want more people to go and look at that. So, and it's fun and it's interesting. And then you, like, at the end, you're like, oh, huh, there's a thought there. There's a little more to that. So
Cute.
yeah, just Kirsten is just so creative, and so there's just so much there, so many layers. I love it. I love
Go
it.
play in that sandbox with her.
Absolutely.
Bye, Raquel.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.